economy to speak on this important subject. I'm pleased both as a Conservative Member of Parliament and as a member for Blackpool North Cleveleys to speak about community orchards. But I'm more pleased still because I'm actually also a russet. A russet is not merely a type of apple, but also the name given to those who originate from the tiny village of Weaverham in the centre of Cheshire, which is where the Wyram russet was first invented. So I am a true Wyram russet. It's a pleasure to talk today about community orchards. Now, my home village of Weaverham was once awash with community orchards, both apples, Wyram russets, and indeed our famous damsons. But in the immediate post-war period, they were all grubbed away to make way for council housing to provide accommodation for the workers who went to work at the great ICI plant in Northwich. And we lost our community orchards. Sadly, we were not alone in that loss. Since 1945, we have lost around 63% of our orchards, one way or another. And in the traditional fruit-growing counties like Herefordshire, Kent, Worcestershire and so on, the loss has been greater still. But things are stirring in the orchard world. There is a susurrus whistling through the boughs that maybe some of us here have not yet quite heard, I don't think. And I would like to pay tribute to a very large number of organisations that I have contacted in the past week who have actually helped me in putting this debate together. Particularly, I'd like to pay tribute to the work of Common Ground, based in Shaftesbury in Dorset, a particularly worthwhile organisation that has done so much to promote Apple Day, which falls on the 21st of October every year, the same day as Trafalgar Day. In fact, I think that adds added credence to the idea of making Trafalgar Day our new bank holiday, and actually calling it Apple Day, perhaps. Other groups, such as the Orchard Network, the Northern Fruit Group, the list is endless. They all do sterling work at protecting the heritage fruit species that I feel so passionate about. The People's Trust for Endangered Species has just completed the National Orchard Inventory as part of their work to protect the noble chafer beetle. It's an example of biodiversity in action. It encompasses so much of what orchards stand for. But I'm sure the Minister is sitting there thinking, why have I summoned him on a Monday night to sit here at the end of the day to talk about community orchards? I'm sure he is not overly amused with me. But let me try to explain why I have come here, because I don't believe that this debate is just about orchards. It's actually about what the meaning of localism is. Because I think there is a need to recognise the distinctiveness of our towns and our villages and our communities, and orchards are a wonderful way to play a role in that, in my view. Many people, when they heard I had this debate today, said, what's a community orchard? And I had to explain to them, well, it's an orchard that's in a community, that anyone can go in at any time to enjoy, to come together, to act as a community, really. They can be a focal point for a village, an estate, or even just a block of flats. And I think it's the same concern that has perhaps animated our national debate over the issue of cloned town centres, of identical chains of shops. That is the same thing that's really behind community orchards, perhaps. It's that need for distinctiveness, for difference, perhaps. And I give way to the honourable gentleman briefly.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I absolutely applaud him in his call for more community orcharding. I come from the county of Herefordshire, which is thrilled to be the largest cider orchard county in the country, and I'd just like to ask him if he shares my view that we shouldn't merely restrict, cider orchards and other orchards to our rural areas, but should also encourage them within urban and suburban areas where they can give so much joy to local people as well.
Indeed, I thank you for that intervention. I'm from a constituency which has no green space at all, apart from a golf course plonked in the middle. So I certainly would welcome to see more green of any variety, perhaps, in my constituency. But I think it's also important to recognise that the last government, although they're not here now, did do something to recognise that orchards were a habitat at risk. They were added to the list of 15 Biodiversity Action Plan habitats. But hitherto there had been no inventory. We weren't really sure what the starting point was. But the work that has just been done by the Traditional Orchard Inventory Project, helped by Natural England, has actually allowed us to identify 17,000 hectares of orchards, many of them basic community orchards. And perhaps the sad aspect of that is that 45% of them are considered to be in poor condition. And that's why perhaps we start to get into the political remit, perhaps, which is, it was welcoming to see in the Natural Environment White Paper one sole reference to community orchards, a reference to Tower Hamlets, very urban areas perhaps the Honourable Gentleman was referring to. And I do think the issue of protection of these orchards is paramount. So I am here today with the authority of many of these orchard stakeholders to ask the Minister what more he can do to offer protection to these orchards. Many people have complained to me about the difficulty of obtaining tree protection orders, for example. There seems to be a failure to realise that many fruit trees actually grow for many hundreds of years. I had no idea that a pear tree could still be maturing after some 300 years, perhaps. Excuse me. There's also a need to make sure that any fruit produced by these trees is not wasted. That means better liaison with the cider industry, as has been mentioned already, but also within communities themselves. And I was pleased to see in the Natural Environment White Paper mention made of local nature partnerships, nature improvement areas, all of which could, I hope, encompass community orchards. And I hope the Minister can give us some comfort that organisations like Common Ground, like the Traditional Orchard Network, will be able to start to bid for the money that allows them to get local groups to conserve their older orchards with small grants for insurance, fencing, stakes and gates, all the things that are needed to put the infrastructure together that will help us to build the community. I'm sure the Minister recognises their importance to biodiversity. I always think of them from my childhood days as almost an edible hedgerow, perhaps. There are so many varieties of fruit on offer in the village. But they are communal assets as well. And I think some of the concern stems from the need for more statutory presumption against the growing up of these smaller orchards for infill development. We often have debates in this chamber about backfill and infill and bungalows popping up everywhere. Orchards are very susceptible to this, so I do hope the Minister can make some sort of guarantee that there will be some consideration over how they can be more protected. Obviously DEFRA cannot do it all though, I do recognise that. Orchards have a great deal of potential. Indeed, his own Fruit and Vegetables Task Force came up with a multitude of recommendations over cross-departmental working that I think were all very helpful. I am one of the few MPs who has managed to wade through the gargantuan Marmot Review into Healthy Living, a 300-page leviathan of nanny state prescriptions it sometimes read like, but it did make the important observation that, and I quote, improving the good environment involves addressing issues concerning the accessibility of affordable and nutritious food that is sustainably produced, processed and delivered. Now, I think in terms of community orchards, I made reference just now to the importance of not wasting the fruit that was grown there. I come from Blackpool North Cleveleys. It is the fourth most deprived constituency represented by a Conservative MP. I have a particularly poor estate in the constituency called Grange Park. It was where the Conservative Party held its social action project for the 2007 party conference. And it is in Grange Park that I have my fruit trees in my constituency planted by the party as part of its social action project. And the great lesson I took from that experiment was that for many children on the estate, fruit comes in a bag from Iceland. The notion, particularly in this week of all weeks as Wimbledon is playing down the road, that fruit has a season, that strawberries have a season, would be incomprehensible to many of the children on that estate. So the use of orchards as an educational tool is also, I think, very important to be considered as well. And whilst the slow food movement is growing in popularity, and I was in a town called Ludlow not too many weeks ago, in fact, enjoying a food festival there myself. Slow food is growing in popularity, but it must not become the preserve of the upper middle classes or something chic or fundamentally fashionable. It actually has to be something that my constituents can access as well. And I'm really pleased that in the most recent Civic Trust Awards in Blackpool, a fruit growing project in Blackpool South, Grow Blackpool, actually won a Civic Award. I also have many other examples around Lancashire of people who have written to me telling me about their smaller community orchards. But there is a recognition that fruits and community orchards do have a role to play in our local communities. And that more importantly, localism is not just about what we ask our councillors to do or what decisions we allow councils to take. It's also about how we see our communities, about this very important idea of particularism. What makes, in my view, this country special is that we've managed to cram so much diversity into such a small geographic area. It is that local distinctiveness which is what makes this country so special. We should never become estranged from the nature at the heart of our communities. And orchards, in the right places, cared for, nurtured and built up, link people with the place in which they live and the history of that place. It certainly linked me to the history of the village I come from. And I very much hope that the community orchard movement will strengthen and grow with government support where appropriate and protection where appropriate. I look forward to hearing some of the Minister's thoughts. Thank you very much.